What does commitment mean to you? The reality is it means different things to different people, or sometimes it's a degree of commitment. Definition-wise, it means being dedicated to a cause or a person, a willingness to give your time, your money, your energy to something that you believe in. I thought of a passage in Psalm chapter 31 and down in verse 5. Into thy hand I commit my spirit. That same thing is what Jesus said on the cross. So when we think about giving something into somebody else's care, how much confidence you have in them depends on whether or not you're willing to do that. For somebody who says, you got the time. Yep, the time is 10:31. Okay, I commit that. Would you give me your watch? Well, if I know you, yeah. If somebody just on the street says, hey, can I have your watch? Let's talk about that. It's not worth all that much. And there's other things you entrust everything to. You entrust yourself to. Sometimes people are afraid of failure. Sometimes they've had bad relationships, and it scares them because, boy, if I be committed, then I remember how it was back home or whatever, and how they got treated poorly. Psalm 37 and verse 5, commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Is it, Lord, here's my plans, but if you want something else, then anything is okay. I'm going to live with that. Life or death or prosperity or poverty, Father, you are in control, and I am comfortable with that. So think about, what does commitment mean to you? What we're going to do this morning, we're going to look at 3 Bible characters. Joe Pisano and I have been studying our way through the Old Testament. And we're in 1 Samuel, and as we've just finished in chapter 17 through 19, you're going to have 3 phenomenal characters we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Samuel, who was a prophet and a judge. We'll talk about David, who was a psalmist and a king. And we'll talk about Jonathan, who was a prince and a friend. They are just giants in the faith. They were in Old Testament times. They're these amazing examples to us. And we're going to see areas where he said, that I could use that, more of that in my life. I would like to grow and build in that area. So as we look at that, think about, as we start this new year, motivation will get you started. All right, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. But commitment is what keeps you going. Most people, 28% of people make New Year's plans, and in 1 week they're gone. They're already out of that thing. And we'll talk about how you can be more successful in the plans you have for making progress in your own life. But let's start with talking about Samuel. Most of you know who he is. We'll talk about some details about how he came to be there. In the book of 1 Samuel, in chapter 1 and down in verse 28, this part I'll move through somewhat quickly. His mother was Hannah. She didn't have any other children. She prays to God, if you give me a son, I will give him to you forever. And if you think about 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 5, here is Timothy was a tremendous New Testament Christian, evangelist, baptized by the Apostle Paul. I went on missionary journeys and such as this. But Paul comments on him. He said, I'm convinced that the faith that is in you first dwelt in your mother and your grandmother. The reality is parents have an enormous impact on their children's faith. Sometimes if the parents are atheists, they raise their kids up that way, and that's all that they knew. As a parent, you influence your children's basic values, their religious values, their life issues. And the stronger you are with your child, the more influence that you'll have. And so as you think about that, parents, take opportunities. Think about things like leading by example, serving God. And this is what Samuel did. He was given into the care of the high priest, Eli. And he served God even as a child. His mother made him a linen ephod in 1 Samuel 2 and in verse 18 and 19. And she'd bring him a new one every year. Well, why would she do that for Samuel? Because he was of priestly descent. We don't think of him as a priest. We don't think him in the lineage of Aaron and Levi, but he was. And so he could wear the priestly garments and be active in that particular area. And so there's a lot of times that parents don't appreciate the opportunity that they have for making an impact on their child. So think about what can you do to introduce your children to serving the Lord and having Christian attitudes. Just this past week, they didn't mean to do it for this reason, but Joe sent me a little video clip of Laura and the kids, and they're singing a song and the kids are making all the motion and they're having a great time of it. If you can enjoy your faith and pass that on to your kids rather than you are going to church, but whoa, then it's because it's a punishment rather than an opportunity. And so think about serving God by serving others. Parents, do your kids see you as committed and on track or vacillating? Well, now I'll go this week and I'll miss 5 weeks and it's okay. Do they hear you praying or do they hear you complaining? Like old Brother Hebert down there to the church because blah, blah. So are they hearing a joyous family serving God? And you say, well, what could you do for serving? Well, there's different things. Maybe they bake cookies and give to people, or write encouraging notes, have a yard sale and give to children's charity, the children's hospital. So you're doing things to help introduce your children to spiritual things. And here was Samuel, and he had a close relationship to the high priest and to the things of God. In 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 3, it says, the lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple. That would be actually the tabernacle. The Solomon's temple had not yet been built, where the ark of God was. Not necessarily the tabernacle and then the temple to follow would have 2 rooms. It'd be the holy place where the menorah, the candlestick was, and the table of showbread and things such as that, and then the most holy place where the ark was. This doesn't demand that he's laying down or on top of the ark, but he's in the same tabernacle where the ark was. And so presumably, as a priest, he would be lawfully able to be in the area of the holy place where the candlestick or the lamp of God was. And so when you're thinking about that, think about parents. Is Christianity, is church a priority? Or is that something, well, provided it doesn't get involved with my vacation plans, or I just want to watch football or something else? Because your children see that. And you give them an opportunity to serve and help and things along that line. And Samuel was a phenomenal person. And Samuel, even as a youth, as a child, in 1 Samuel 3:10, God would speak to him, and he thought it was Eli calling him. And Eli said, no, that's not me. And so the third time, he came to Eli, and he said, no, that's the Lord. You listen to him. And when he speaks, say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And so there was a message given to him that Samuel had to relay, and the rest of his life, almost everything he did was exemplary. He just stayed on track, did the right thing. The only area that's mentioned to him that was a disappointment was his children. His sons didn't grow up and follow in the faith. And you say, the only thing that I have to attribute to that, he was a judge and he made annual circuits to different cities, and so maybe there wasn't enough time with the sons. But he himself became a faithful prophet and a judge. And so in our own lives, is our attitude as Samuel's was? Speak, Lord, for your servant hears. And so you might think for this coming year, Lord, I want to be more obedient. I want to be more responsive to everything that you have to tell me. And Samuel goes on and anoints the next two kings of Israel. Enormous impact, and we'll see how that plays out a little bit in David's life. And so the second giant in the faith that we want to talk about is not only Samuel, as a child, demonstrated a commitment to God. But then as he grew up into adult, the same kind of commitment. If he has to rebuke an unfaithful king, he does it. Anoint a new one, he does it, even at danger to himself. So when we come into 1 Samuel 16 and in verse 1, what we find is Saul had so much potential to be a tremendous leader, and he was a tremendous military man. But that's about word God, man. He is a warrior, and they needed that to defend themselves against the Philistines and Ammonites and all these kind of people. But in 1 Samuel 16:1, and the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? So fill your horn with oil and go, and I'll send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite. I'm going to send you to Bethlehem. There's a guy there named Jesse. For I have selected a king for myself among his sons. Whoa! You're doing that, you already got a king out there. I mean, Saul is the military head of that nation. And while he is king, you want me to anoint somebody else in a family. Well, I know it's going to happen. He's going to hear about it. And just like a lot of dictators, why you do that, that's treason. And God said, but I tell you what, here is the situation. You've got a job and I want you to go. But he's afraid of doing that. You know, Saul hears about it, he's going to kill me. He said, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a young heifer, a female cow, not quite adult size yet. And so at about 11 months, depending on the breed and such as that, that's about a 500-pound animal. Well, if you're going to offer a peace sacrifice, just saying, God, I'm so thankful for all your blessings, that would be an appropriate sacrifice. It wouldn't raise suspicion. Why are you going to Jesse's house? Well, we're going to sacrifice. Okay. And so that would take some of the weight of the mission he's on and the suspicion off him, where he wouldn't lose his life by doing it. And so as you get into chapter 1 Samuel 16, and as you get down into verses 12 and 13, you know, he goes through all the sons. Here's Eliab, and Samuel sees him and he says, surely the Lord's anointed. Man, this guy, I'll just say, you know, shoulders out to here and a strong jaw, and, you know, Charlton Heston or whoever you are. Man, here's the hero. And God said, no. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. That's not the one. No. Oh, sure. Well, how about this one? Next one. Nope, not him, not him, not him. And he asked Jesse, the dad, you know, Samuel realized I'm sent here to anoint somebody, and God said, none of these work. Do you have any others? He says, well, there's yet the youngest, and he's out there with the sheep. You know, we'd say, hey, there's a kid out there with the goats, but why would you want him? You said, bring him, for we shall not sit down until he comes. Wow. So 1 Corinthians, I'm stuck on 1 Corinthians, because so many times we're quoting 1 Corinthians 16 for one reason or another. 1 Samuel and in chapter 16, and then down in verse 12 and 13 is where this momentous occasion takes place. And so they bring him, and he said in verse 12, so he sent and brought him in, and now he was ruddy, with beautiful eyes and a handsome appearance. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. That's the one. The kid, that's the one. Wow. And then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. And Samuel rose and went to Ramah. That's his home. Wow. One of the things that I thought about is, for the rest of his life, David has the potential to be this phenomenal character among the people of God. He makes some tragic mistakes, and he pays for it dearly. But I want you to think about this. How old was David when he did this? He may be as young as 15, but not likely any older than 17. Now that poses some problems for the family. Here is Samuel, the national prophet and judge, comes to the family and said, look, no, you boys, you're 28 and 30-year-olds. Nope. You got anybody else? Well, I'll just pick it in the middle. We got this 16-year-old out there with the animals. He said, bring them. That's the one. Well, then you have to wrestle with, that's the one what? Well, he would have said, and by the way, he's the next king of Israel, and everybody blow the horns and let's get the coronation going. That might have been seen, how was it seen by the family? Maybe about God wants special blessings on him. But there's no record that Samuel told him what those blessings are. And so as David goes forward in his life, he was anointed. He was set apart. Think about this. Your lives are set apart for God. And your job is to do what David was directed to do. That David served his own generation for the purpose of God and then fell asleep. Yes, but sometimes there were tragic elements, his adultery. He was not flawless in every respect. Sometimes he would lie. Sometimes he would direct an assassination. Sometimes he'd want to murder somebody and somebody else stopped him and said, oh, don't do that. But think about this. He was truly repentant. He really wanted to be better. And he would pray to God and pray publicly and write it down for us in the Psalms. And so when we look at the book of Hebrews, and in chapter 11, it takes not just one, but many characters of the Old Testament, and talked about, certainly they had failures. Abraham did, and these different ones, but God doesn't stress the failures. The things that he stresses is their faith. You know, and that gives hope to us. You say, you know what? You've got a future and a hope. God said, I'm not going to look at the past. Yeah, but man, there was a car crash here and this was upside down. Yeah, but what do you want to do now? Lord, forgive me. Do not take your Holy Spirit from me. And as David said, restore to me the joy of thy salvation. And so Samuel was young. David was in his teens and then 30 as he became king. And victorious, became a national hero where he defeated Goliath, and perhaps he's just 18 or 19 when he does that. Why do you say that? Well, you had to be 20 to enter the army, as according to Numbers chapter 1 and verse 3. And when he goes to bring supplies to his brothers, when the army is facing the Philistines and Goliath is out there challenging the entire Israelite army and everybody's scared to death, and his brother thinks, well, you're just a smart aleck. You're out here to see blood and guts. He says, I'm just asking questions. What'll be done for the man that defeats Goliath? He gets in to talk to Saul about it, and Saul says, you're but a youth. You're just a lad. And Goliath has been a warrior from his youth. You've just been out there, handling flea-bitten animals. But the reason I say that, as a young person, he was dedicated. He had a commitment. And so some of the principles we see in this battle is what really matters in life is your size of your faith, not your size. In 1 Samuel chapter 17 and down in verse 31, here's where when the words which David spoke were heard, they were told to Saul, and Saul sends for him. And then he said, you're not, verse 33, Saul said, you're not able to go against him. 34, David said to Saul, your servant, that as I was tending my father's flock, when a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he arose up against me, I seized him by the beard and struck him and killed him. And your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of God. Now, I don't know how he did that, whether he took the sling first and knocked it 4 quarters dizzy and then come up and grabbed it and stabbed it. I don't know how that happened. Bashed him on the head with the club or whatever. But what he's saying is, I want to tell you, I am not afraid. I may just be a teenager, but I have been in battles, I'll just say, all my life. You go, wow, that's phenomenal. That's amazing. And then when here is Saul says, well, why don't you put on my armor? And he said, man, I don't know how to move in your armor. Because David is not, a French sword fighter. He doesn't need armor on. Man, he's been a shepherd. I got a slinger and a club, and I know how to take out lions. Wow. I tell you what, I am not afraid of a lion. He said, Paul, you're kidding. No, I'm not afraid of a lion. Well, I'm willing to face one. Well, how would you do it? Well, if he's down there about 100 feet in the pit and I've got a high-powered rifle and I'm on the top, I'm not afraid. He's not going to jump 100 feet up. Well, Paul, how about jumping down in their pit with him? I'm not interested in doing that. You get too close. And so here is David when he said, I don't know how to move in your armor. I just know how to do what I know how to do. And so he goes forth, and down in verse 47, I'll start in 45, David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you, and I'll give it the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines to the birds of the sky, the beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Whew, man, I get goosebumps. 47, and that all the assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's. We sing that song, the battle belongs to the Lord. That is, he's the one in control. And he will give you into our hands. Then as it happened, when the Philistine rose and came and drew near to David, that David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. What struck me about that, David said, oh man, I got myself in trouble now. I had better get out of here. He didn't do that. He ran toward the challenge rather than away from it. How about for us? Do we, oh man, I don't know, and that's pretty tough. Or we just take a deep breath and say, we got a job to do. Let's get after it. And so what he did was he came prepared. He had his shepherd's bag, he had his sling, and he reached down in the valley of Elah, and from the brook there took 5 stones. We were blessed years ago to be able to be in Israel, and among the places we went is the valley of Elah. And here's the 2 hills that the Philistines were on one side, and it's just a small valley, and just a little stream was through, and stones all over the place. And so what you want is you don't want to, you're not trying to throw this boulder. You can't do it. You want a small round stone, smooth as possible, because you're going to have the best trajectory. I did a lot of research on it, and there's various authorities and people just brand new saying, well, I tried it, and in so many months I could do this or that, or the expert, but easily, on leaving the sling, the stone travels at 60 miles an hour. And it hit Goliath in the head and sunk in. Romans talked and used not only archers, but slingers as part of their military tactics. And oftentimes armies were more afraid of the slingers than they were the archers. That they could get the stone if they did a high trajectory, 1,200 feet, 1,000 feet, more, 3-4 football fields long. But you can be deadly accurate, the Romans said, at 150 feet. They said the expert ones could not only hit the face, but the part of the face that they aimed at. Wow. So when David's going out, he doesn't have to wear armor. He's not going to be that close to him. A guy's got a knife. I don't care, if he's 200 yards away, he's not going to reach me with the knife. But if I've got a weapon that can reach that far, and he did, I want you to think about, David went prepared. And it'd be good for us to think about being a prepared people. What about in 2022? Do you have some plans? Here's how I would like to grow spiritually. Maybe I'd like to read my Bible more. Or I was talking to Ron Swift this week, and he was talking about how he has a Bible app on his tablet, and you punch it, and it'll read the Bible to you, and you can read along with it. You might say, I'd like to get healthier this year. I was talking to the Pisanos, and that I thought, oh, yeah, man, I'm old, and this hurts, and that hurts, and yeah, well. I said, Paul, look, why don't you start by eating better? Well, I could do that. Yeah, I'll eat better the rest of my life. Oh, I'm a sweet junkie. I said, okay, I know you can have a plan for 30 days. It takes 3 weeks to establish a habit. So I thought, I'm going to go 4. What are you going to do at the end of 4? I'm going right back to eating Twinkies. Oh, I'm not going right back to eating Twinkies. I've got a plan. I got a direction I want to go. Being reasonably healthy and fit is important. It does all kinds of things physically for you. Avoids cancer and heart disease and diabetes and on along that line. And so, and what about exercise? All old and creaky. It's okay, a week from now, maybe we got family coming out this week. Jenny and family was going to come, and their plane schedules is all fouled up, but we'll see. Maybe not. But anyhow, a week from now, I said, okay, you're going to start back in. Does your body hold up to this or that? What about if you keep a gratitude journal? 1 Thessalonians 5:18, giving thanks in all things. What if I want to be more positive this year? Work on that positive self-talk. In Proverbs 15 and verse 15 and following, the cheerful heart has a continual feast. Choose healthier habits and be wise for yourself. All kinds of things. You say, this is how I want to be prepared. I want to have a good 2022, regardless of what the rest of the world does. If you're wise for yourself. And the last person, in closing minutes, I want to talk about is Jonathan. Another phenomenal person. We've looked at Samuel. We've looked at David. Jonathan and David were best friends. And friendship is a blessing. Proverbs 18:24. There's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And think about you being that kind of a friend. I appreciated that in my family we cared about each other, but I was never close to my brother. I was always closer to Christians. He just chose a different walk in life. 1 Samuel 18, verse 1, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. Well, what does that mean to love your neighbor as yourself? Well, that means being thoughtful of them, being forgiving of them, being compassionate for their circumstances. They got themselves into it. Yeah, but maybe they wouldn't have done that the next time through. And so 6 times in the Bible, once in the Old Testament, 5 times in the New Testament, is that talked about, being genuine. And how about being sacrificial? In 1 Samuel 18, 2 and 4, Jonathan gave to David his robe. This is a royal robe. This isn't a bathrobe, some fuzzy old flea-bitten thing. And his armor. This is the royal armor. And his sword. And his bow. Wow, the generosity of Christians here has always amazed me, whether we're helping individual believers here or believers down in Texas and other places, or individuals that are not believers that just need a hand. I personally want to thank you all. You've just done great. And then one of the most amazing things, there was not 1 ounce of jealousy that we can see in Jonathan. In 1 Samuel 23, 16 and 17, Jonathan meets David, and the Bible says he encouraged him, Jonathan encouraged David in God. Jonathan says to David, it's been 10 years that Saul has been pursuing him, maybe 15 total by the end of their lives. And Jonathan says, my father will not find you. Jonathan was dedicated to his dad. He loved him. But he wasn't going to surrender a friend who was doing right just because his father was off the track. But here's the statement he makes. He said, you will be king, and I shall be next to you. Jonathan, wait a minute. You're the prince. You were supposed to be king. Yeah, but Dad got off track, and God said, your kingdom shall not endure. There was no sense of woe is me and pity mouth and all such as that from Jonathan. He was happy that David was going to be king. His best friend going to be king. I'll be right next to you. I'll be your counselor, your prime minister, your strongest supporter. How good is that? They were lifelong friends. When Jonathan and Saul are finally killed in a battle with the Philistines, David had still had to be avoiding Saul because Saul was just nutty and would get off into these raging moods. And so they go into battle, and they're both killed. And David writes from where he is about where that battle took place and how they died on Mount Gilboa, and we were there. There's a hillside of Fortress City, Bethshan. We were reading this at that particular time. And in 2 Samuel chapter 1, and down in verse 23 and following, David writes and says, Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in life. They cared about each other. And in their death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet and put ornaments of gold on your apparel. I mean, he was a great warrior. Verse 25, how the mighty were fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan is slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was more wonderful than the love of women. He said, I know why women love me. I'm a good-looking dude. I'm a national hero. I'm the giant killer. But that you love me, I'm taking your place, and you're okay with that. He said, I can't get my mind around that. How have the mighty fallen, and the weapons of war have perished? Wow. What about having and being that kind of a friend? Jim mentioned John 15:14 in the Lord's Supper devotional, where he said, "You are my friends if you do what I command you." We're here. We have that opportunity to be a friend of Jesus. That is, not just we like him, but we'll actually do what he says. What we want to do is live the rest of our lives looking the kind of example that Jesus set for us. That you see these phenomenal characters in the Old Testament, they sometimes would make poor choices, but they could be forgiven, stand tall, and be giants in the faith. And so can you. If you're here this morning, you'd like to respond in any way, you'd like the prayers of the saints, you'd like to be baptized into Christ, we can make anything happen. Our baptistry is doing a little bit of rehab. You say, but I want to be baptized right now. It'll probably be filled in 30 minutes. You just have to have a desire that I want to move forward, and I want to be the kind of person I ought to be. Jim, why don't you lead us in this song? And audience, would you be standing with me?
My Lord, I need nothing beside you. Without you, I could not have stood.